With technology-infused remote hiring models and strategies, there is an imperative need to evolve HR processes and efficiencies to match the changing workforce structures. The widespread adoption of remote work has enabled gig workers and the larger informal sector to access opportunities that remained far-fetched in the pre-COVID times. But how do you efficiently and effectively onboard and absorb this genesis of a new mix of employment models? A very good morning to everyone joining us today. Welcome to yet another exciting discussion of the Remote Hiring Week 2020. Thank you to all of you who have contributed greatly to this entire trending conversation so far. Today, we're going to talk about the essentials of remote onboarding. Quick housekeeping before we kickstart the session. If you have any questions during the session, please feel free to use the chat window. We will bring them up towards the end of the session during the 15 minutes reserved for Q&A. So stay tuned to your chat box and keep posting the questions you have for our speakers. Remote Hiring Week 2020 is brought to you by Authbridge in association with People Matters. Authbridge offers cutting-edge authentication technology for over 1,500 modern businesses, seamlessly delivering identity and background verification for their users, employees, and other business stakeholders. They work across industries and clients, including many Fortune 500 companies. Now, coming to our speakers for today's session. Joining us today, our first speaker is Ajay Trehan. Ajay is the founder and CEO of Authbridge and a veteran in building and operating successful businesses. His foresight and logical bent of mind have contributed to his success, as has his ability to listen to his gut timely. He has previously worked with organizations like Shriram Industrial Enterprises Limited and ICI India, before taking a leap of faith and chasing his dream to be an entrepreneur and leading Authbridge through many phases of innovation and business transformation. Under Ajay's leadership, Authbridge has virtually paved the way for this industry in India and established a benchmark for its competitors through innovation, disruption, and tech enablement. Authbridge's business model and processes and how it changed the architecture of background verification in India are taught as case studies in top-notch institutes like Cornell University, ISB, and IIMA. Welcome, Ajay. It's great to have you on board with us.
Thank you, Bhavna. A very good morning to everyone. Look forward to the session.
Thank you, Ajay. Moving on to our next speaker for the session, we have with us Praharsh Chandra. Praharsh is the co-founder and chief of operations at Shadowfax Technologies Private Limited. Praharsh is one of the youngest CEOs in the logistics sector who has steered Shadowfax to become India's largest crowdsourced logistics platform. With his sharp business acumen and keen operational insights, Praharsh has successfully navigated through the highly competitive hyperlocal and logistics landscape, evolving Shadowfax into an end-to-end logistics platform with a pan-India presence, disrupting traditional supply chains. He has a BTech in mechanical engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology, New Delhi, and has previously worked with the global management consultancy firm A.T. Kearney. He started his entrepreneurial journey in 2015, co-founding Shadowfax. Welcome to the session, Praharsh.
Thank you so much, Bhavna. Look forward to it as well.
Thank you, Praharsh. Now, before we begin with the session, I'm going to roll out a quick poll to get everyone to put on their thinking hats. Please log on to menti.com and enter the code 6041167 to access the poll. The poll question for today is, how technology-enabled is your organization to manage remote onboarding processes in the emerging workplace paradigm? Your options are well-equipped to take on remote onboarding, not well-equipped yet, but getting there. Tech adoption isn't a feasible option and we're struggling, or we don't know what to do. Please make sure you log on to menti.com and the code is there right on your screens. It is 6041167. So we're going to take another probably 10 to 15 seconds and give everyone time to respond before I invite Ajay and Praharsh to share their thoughts on the perspectives shared by all of you. There seem to be equal responses for people who are prepared and who are well equipped and not well equipped yet. All right. We have a lot of responses in now. Ajay and Praharsh, would you want to take this up now?
Yeah, I mean, very interesting. I mean,
swing towards the well-equipped side. So, no, so a large part of the aspects of the session, it seems, are already covered. Huh?
Okay, at least it's good to know that most organizations are not falling in the "we don't know what to do" category. So at least most organizations are attempting and experimenting in one way or another. So it'll be good fun to get some questions through the session, and Praharsh, to hear your story. I'm sure there'll be a lot of learning for people who are in the second and third category, not well equipped, and tech adoption where they feel is not feasible. I'm sure your hyperlocal model is going to be very interesting for people to hear. Zero touch model.
No, for sure. I think even for people who are well equipped, I think there are some interesting perspectives from our end that would love to share with people around here. I think given the fact that we work with a lot of people in the network, right? Talking about hundreds of thousands of people who usually log into the platforms, right? So the areas we usually think about these similar problem statements is very slightly different. So it would be interesting to delve a little bit into them as we go along.
Right. So great. So Bhavna will take on from here. Thank you so much. And just by way of a little bit of context setting, I don't think any one of us would have ever witnessed an event of this magnitude ever in our life, a true black swan event in the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite some of the best PCP teams that all of us employ, many of us didn't know how to react in this short term. We were not really prepared. At Upbridge, we've been working with hundreds of organizations across a range of sectors and industries, assisting them with their onboarding, documentation collection, and authentication processes. But the COVID-19 outbreak tested almost every single process across every single industry that we came across. Gig economy, which also went into a tailspin in some way initially, saw some major tailwinds briefly thereafter. A select few could innovate and grow rapidly in this phase. And when demand was, and that's when, in the early stage itself, when the demand of, logistics went to its peak, Shadowfax, which is one of the most successful gig economy companies in India today, innovated rapidly and converted this adversity into an opportunity for itself. And it's my pleasure to have today Praharsh with us, who's one of the co-founders at Shadowfax, and share with us the journey and experience that he and his team went through, and how they innovated up, their own processes of onboarding their delivery partners. When they were onboarding about 30 to 40,000 delivery partners across the country, even in this phase. So Praharsh, over to you. It'll be really helpful if you could tell us a little bit about Shadowfax, as to what does the company do for people who don't know, and then about how you were onboarding partners before the COVID era, and we take it on from there.
Perfect, Ajay. Thank you so much for the kind introduction words. Good morning to everyone who's joined the session. So what I'll do is I'll just give a quick context of what Shadowfax is, because since we are a B2B company, we are not always in the limelight. We usually work with other large businesses to solve a lot of logistics problems that they have. So quick, who we are, I think before we delve into the questions that you mentioned, Ajay. So at Shadowfax, we are a multi-category B2B end-to-end logistics service provider, right? So what we do basically is that we have two key sorts of model. One is a point-to-point network, and the other is a hub and spoke logistics network. What happens in point-to-point is very similar to what you see Ola and Uber do, albeit we do it for businesses for their logistics needs. So you need a delivery boy, you need a light commercial vehicle, you need a heavy vehicle in your platform to move any product from one point to the other. You can use the service to get a particular resource and conduct your business. On the other side of the spectrum is a hub and spoke logistics model, and that's your more traditional logistics piece. What happens there is very similar to, say, what a Blue Dart does, in that we move products in between cities, in between facilities. So this takes up categories such as courier, e-commerce, and so on and so forth. But here we work both. We deliver it to the customers of our businesses, but also to retail outlets, other depots, etc., etc. So you have movements happening in between cities via air, surface, or any other medium that would be relevant, right? So that's what our business is. And as you can imagine, given the focus on last mile, there are a lot of partners we have on the platform. I would say that we've currently got almost around more than 2 lakh people who join the platform, and what they do is basically support the last mile delivery of products from businesses to consumers. And the 2 lakh plus people include people who have bikes. There are around 10,000 more people who own trucks who are on the platform. There are around 5,000 cyclists who are there on platform. So anyone who has any modes of transportation which can be used for logistics services, we kind of look forward to having them on our platform and on our network. So that's broadly the kind of diaspora we have within the company. Now, we started off in 2015, right? And it was the time wherein a lot of people were trying to reimagine how traditional supply chains would work, how would we enable this whole home delivery concept. I think it might now seem very obvious that you can get a lot of your products in an hour or so, but it was not so much so far as 2015 was concerned. Right? The whole food delivery transformation happened. We're right now in the middle of a grocery delivery transformation. It's going to move towards your mobile phones to any other gadget that you have, to FMCG products being delivered in 45 minutes. So we felt that there is this movement towards deliveries, etc., that is going to happen. So what we wanted to do was build a platform which could help connect businesses with essentially partners or logistics enablers who can help them provide so many services to their consumers, because this is not something you want to be building on your own. And we could have chosen the path of just creating a technology platform, but what ended up happening was that we all wanted to create a meaningful impact so far as people are concerned. Interestingly, the session is being organized by People Matters. It was one of the core reasons why we didn't leave ourselves to just being a tech platform. We felt that it is very important to actually execute these things on ground as well. And hence, we decided that while we create a platform, we will also be taking up operation side of it directly. And since then, I guess from starting off with a hyperlocal unit, we ended up with a significant multifold logistics business across the network. Now, coming to the very specific question on the partner side of things, right, as to how we used to onboard people and what the current status is, right? We started off with all your traditional approaches. When you've got so many partners in the platform, and when you're starting off, you don't really have a lot of tech to bank upon. We had third-party people who used to help us. We had a huge fleet on street team. These people would essentially go to areas, ground clusters, we used to call them. They would try to search, conduct camps, try to do those loudspeaker activities when people would come in droves. We would take registrations. We would conduct a piece of training, and then they would get onboarded onto our app. That's how we started off. So as you can imagine, this whole process was a mix of high people involvement. There was a lot of need to keep ad hoc fleet on street available in multiple areas across cities. But it used to work for us. But what we soon realized was that this is not something that you could really scale. And over a period of time, we've kind of, at least before the COVID, we actively tried to add a lot of other channels as well into the overall mix. So broadly, if you look at the network today, right, it used to be 100% fleet on street onboarded. Today, almost 60 to 70%, and I'm talking about the pre-COVID era. Just before the whole lockdown happened, almost around 50 to 60% of our total onboarding had shifted towards online channels. And by that, I mean channels which had to do with referrals, your online marketing, and so on and so forth. There was an active push that we felt is needed in the company towards such mediums, because that would allow us for the scale that we needed to bring in. I think just before COVID, we were running at almost 25,000 onboardings every month. You can just imagine what the numbers end up being for a year. And what would happen, that this whole process was divided into a set of activities. And that's a standard lead funnel, right? You've got lead generation. So you've got a feet on street, which is working. You've got databases, which are there. You've got Google marketing activities that are there. You've got referrals. You've got online channels. And all of these leads that come in, that are then taken to the next stage, which is lead processing, wherein you try to gauge which of these leads are truly interested, and they fit the criteria of skills that you need in the organization or the activity that you're doing. Post which, what we would do is we would take them to the onboarding stage. And what would happen at that point in time was that all of these leads, they would get an automated response saying that so-and-so facility is the area which is nearest to you. Please go there to that facility. And these are large onboarding centers we would run. Every onboarding center would cater to around 100, 150 people in a day. And people would visit the nearest facility where the facility managers would undertake background verification, document collection, inventory distribution, and one very important aspect of telling people about Shadowfax and training them on the core initial steps that are needed. Post which the person would then be left to go and start off with conducting transactions on the platform. So that's how the flow worked. And of course, post the first transaction that happens on the platform, there is an array of next steps that happen, but I'll keep the conversation limited to whatever happens before the transaction. Usually after that, what you do is you need to manage their issues, because once they're there on the platform, you need to ensure that you have a robust infrastructure to manage any kind of issues that might be propping up. And these are all people issues, right? From some manager not being rude with them, some customer creating some sort of an issue, and so on and so forth. And then it all finishes into the whole lead life cycle finishes into a person exiting the platform when you try to get them back onto the platform. So this is the flow and quick gist of how it used to look just before the pandemic.
Yeah, and the pandemic and the announcements of lockdown, I'm sure sent a lot of shivers through the system, and I'm sure a lot of organizations I know of were left wondering as to how do they run their businesses now. And I'm sure you would have also landed yourself in a very similar state of mind, and so would your team have. And from whatever I've heard of how Shadowfax transformed, it's been an amazing journey. So tell us more about it. I mean, so announcements of lockdowns and the business still had to continue because you were in the logistics space and your customers were expecting you to, ramp up as quickly as possible to be able to service them. So I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think we're just a quick point before that. I think on the slides we're a little ahead. It will be good if we can be on the second slide, perhaps. Thank you so much. So I think COVID came at a point wherein no one was really expecting it. I think our processes were fairly well set. We were on track to add more directly run onboarding centers across India. I think we already had these centers operating out of around 300 cities. We were on track to keep on adding them and making them even denser, because as soon as an onboarding center would start onboarding more than 100 people a day, you would want to have another facility, because you would not want so many people to come to the same facility for these activities. And then suddenly we realized we could not really use this whole onboarding center strategy anymore, right? You could not have gatherings which are this big. You could not conduct a lot of one-on-one sessions that you would ideally want to with people. You would not get these forums to conduct training. And immediately post that, what happened was that you had to switch to methods which were all online and digital. I think there are some methods which are available for easy use, and that's something which we started off with. Like I said, since around 50 to 60% of our onboarding was happening through channels such as referrals, etc. So far as lead generation was concerned, the whole Fleet on Street edition was the first thing which got impacted. So the 30 to 40% which was coming through the ground team that we had, that suddenly fell to zero, which means we had a fundamental gap in the total leads that we had in the network. We were running at around 60 to 70% of that. At the second stage, from an onboarding perspective, like I said, you lost access to run these facilities, wherein all of these people or most of these people would usually come and get trained and get their inventories distributed. That is the second thing that happened. Third, this whole thing meant that document collection, verifications, etc., also became a bit tricky, because you would then have to ensure that someone else is taking the onus of putting it onto the platform, right? See, when you're looking at these blue-collar workers, right, what happens is everybody knows that they have to give a PAN card, but even though our mobile application tells them to upload it, it's not very intuitive for people to automatically do it. So there was the onboarding centers used to act as a guidance mechanism when people would actually do it properly enough. And then suddenly we found ourselves losing that touch as well. And then you would have people join into the network with a little bit of an average training of sorts, and not really seeing a face across this whole journey. There were people who would come onto the platform just by talking to our mobile application. That's it. And what this all led to is, it led to a very poor. We were able to run this whole process, but as you can imagine, the rider NPS, which is the whole satisfaction that you get during an onboarding process, fell to a real low. While we could see business impact of this, because the first, the new joinees, basically the people who are yet to do their first 100 transactions on the platform, we saw tremendously poor performance coming in from them. Now, how did you go about solving a lot of these, right? So coming from right at the top, if you look at lead generation, we fell to 50 to 60%. But what we decided was that since we can only run online channels, why not double down on referrals? Why not double down on online marketing? And why not spend some bit of budget that you've got left over there to at least bring the overall numbers up to that bit much, right? We initiated this whole thing known as a zero-touch onboarding piece, right? And your elements of referral, etc., kind of fall into place within that. And we kind of double down on this whole strategy. And what zero-touch basically means is, can you take a lead from a lead stage to your platform, giving him all of the experience that a lead is supposed to get, but still not ever reaching a situation where you're having to have too many touch points. So we doubled down, like I said, on referrals. And the great thing was that in a lot of these things, and you would have seen that this happens in, say, an Uber. When you've got demand from all over India and in a various set of clusters, a single referral strategy also doesn't work. What you want to do is create surges at various places. So if you're having a deficit in one area more than the other area, you want to pay the people of that area more to refer someone. So that's when we created a lot of these dynamic search structures, which allowed us to, have kind of map demand to supply requirements that bit better. And it would all happen on the back end. So your demand would be already there in the system. So you would know what your deficit is. Basis the deficit, you would estimate the number of people you need in each locality. And basis that, you would try to get more referrals in, and you would try to give surges which mimic the demand aggregation points, right? Wherever you've got your red zone demand areas, you would want more referrals to come in from there. So we did that as step one to help, at least with the lead side of it. The next step was the most difficult part, which is getting to have some bit of conversation and training done without having a physical space. We converted everything to a call-based approach. We had this whole call center team work not out of a call center, but out of their houses, their regular mobile phones. And any lead that would come in, they would try to call each and every one of them, training them, guiding them through the process. And it worked to some extent. We tried to introduce video conferencing as much as possible, because sometimes you just had to give, those examples of how to upload documentation, etc. So for that, we tried to do that, but the video thing didn't really kick off. We felt that, especially for gig workers, blue-collar workers, they don't really are that. They are tech savvy, but they will not usually come on a video platform to chat with you and get things done, right? So we felt that there was a drop-off there. So the direct call-based approach worked, but we did see a large percentage of people whom you would just not be able to reach, right? Because if you're just calling the guy, that guy might not be available. Since they're workers, they might be busy with some other tasks. Usually what these people want is they would want to reach out to you when they are available. They cannot reach out to you when you are available. So that's the problem that we saw, which led to a little bit of a poorer conversion on that side. But yeah, we were able to convert a decent bit of folks, and post that, whoever would send in their documentation, they would get onboarded in. So we were able to maintain the funnel with these strategies. But what was still a problem was that our NPS scores were not improving, because this whole experience was still broken in a lot of ways. You still had people just speaking to someone on the phone, and then suddenly you're onboarded on a platform and you have to do your first order without even knowing what this company is, what it is supposed to do. And there's only so much you can transfer over a mobile phone, right? We also had we've got this whole Gurukul segment on our mobile app, wherein we conduct training sessions. And what we realized was that even though there are mandatory trainings over there, a lot of people did take those in. A lot of people would just play the video but not really listen to what is being spoken in the video. And hence, when you would conduct tests after the training is done, you would realize that a lot of people still don't know our very basic stuff. So the NPS scores were so-so, while our overall performance was also not that great, which is your business performance, right? Whether the deliveries are on time or not, whether you're canceling lesser number of transactions on the platform or not. So those were not running that great. And I guess in the first 2-3 weeks, we were brainstorming on how to solve this. When to be very honest, I think we should have come up with this idea much earlier. But someone said that, hey, we're a hyperlocal company, so why don't we just make everything hyperlocal so far as our remote onboarding is concerned, right? From speaking to the person, to training the person, to collecting documents, to resolving issues. Why don't we break it down to small sets of 500-meter distances, wherein, say, if I am a person who wants to work on the Shadowfax platform, I will get a ping which will say that you can go to the facility which is literally walking distance from where you are. There is a person who will give his own direct time to explain about the company, to explain about our technology, to explain about what this is, to help you get onboarded onto the platform, and you're done. And you're looking at creating these small zones in a city like Bangalore. You can have anywhere between 200, 300, 400 such centers, which help you run such a setup. And we realized that this was pretty intuitive because we're a hyperlocal company, but we didn't really think about it in that sense. And what we ended up doing post that was reaching out to a set of kirana stores, schools, real estate agents, anyone who was having a space which was free. And as it happens, because of COVID, there were a lot of facilities and small spaces which were not really being used by people for anything. Exactly. So those spaces ended up becoming interesting places where you could conduct onboarding. So today I'm delighted to actually talk about this. We've got almost 1,000 franchisees, which we're calling hyperlocal touchpoints in the platform, spread across 300 cities, as you can see here. And what has happened is that post this whole experience of going to a small having an interaction with a person in a small facility, getting a basic training done, getting an understanding of core aspects that you're supposed to work on, getting an idea of the kind of skills that are needed, that helped us improve our NPS scores. So we ended up with the highest ever NPS scores we've ever had, even including the onboarding centers we used to run for ourselves. And that's because there was a lot more personal to personal interaction that happened. In our onboarding centers as well, we used to have at least 100, 150 people come together. Because what is the traditional way you think about solving these things? You are able to solve for cost only if you are able to aggregate more number of things in singular units, which is to say, in the case of onboarding, if you can do an onboarding, in case of mass hiring, in case you're able to do it for 300 people together, you are able to optimize your costs. You would not want to hire everybody individually, unlike how you do it for corporates. And so we had also kind of organized these in traditional setups. That's what we realized, wherein we felt that the cost will be most optimum when you have 200 people coming to the facility on a daily basis and getting trained. And it works great. But I guess what the franchisee learning told us was that you don't really need that. You can also create such setups which are variable to the number of people that come. And these centers ended up getting higher NPS because of the direct interaction every individual would get. So you can imagine 40,000 people on board. I think we onboarded last month, and everyone had a face-to-face interaction with someone before joining the network. And that's a direct training, that's a direct learning that you get, which you just cannot replicate through a lot of other means. And that same person and facility also becomes something to go back to in case there is some other issue. So in case you're troubled because of anything, you can just literally take a walk, speak with the person, that person registers the issue, and as long as you've got someone to speak to it, that's the human psyche, right? People usually respond to the affirmative. And we saw our NPS scores double up. Asset distribution was a problem because we have to give a lot of inventory and gadgets to people, and that we were not able to do. That went up because all of these facilities, we kind of bulk them with a lot of our inventory, and they sell it on our behalf. So that ended up seeing an improved coverage, while training saw the biggest jump. You saw almost 100% effectiveness, and that then led to a lot of business results as well, so far as performance is concerned. So that was an interesting learning so far as the overall journey is concerned. I don't know if you have some pictures here also in the slide after this, but yeah, you can see this.
Yeah. So very interesting. I mean, I think you're being very modest by saying that you should have come across this model. This model should have hit you much earlier. I think I can tell you most organizations would have come across this model or would have been able to think of this model even now. So it's serious innovation, and you actually turned the onboarding model on its head. So very clearly the paradigm of getting 200 people into one onboarding center and thinking all this while that that's the best economy of scale you can get out of onboarding, to changing it completely to getting 10 people coming in a day and being done in a hyper local setup is an absolute innovation.
I think the most interesting one that I saw here, sorry to cut you short, Ajay. So most interesting one that I saw here was, I also didn't realize that we had some schools that had preschools that had gotten onboarded. I didn't realize this. They're just small, you have these small 30 to 40 kid preschools. Since kids were not coming over there, the instructor and the principal over there was like, "We'll be more than happy to onboard your people for you." I was like, "This is brilliant." So, and I saw it in one of our meetings wherein suddenly a school popped up and the team was like, "We onboarded these guys as well." I was like, "Wow, now this is interesting." So.
Yeah, so it'll be very interesting actually. I mean, you solved multiple problems actually with one innovation. One, of course, you solved your own onboarding challenge of how do you get 30 to 40,000 people pan India within a 1 kilometer radius of a pin code so easily and effectively. And secondly, of course, you ended up, I'm sure, providing employment and source of income to a lot of these hyperlocal organizations across the country who were struggling at that time. It will be interesting to know, Praharsh, how did you go about selecting these franchisees or hyperlocal locations? If you could just spend a few minutes on that before we throw it open for questions.
Yeah. So I think for us, the base requirements were fairly straightforward. We always take an upfront assessment of the space, of the person that we're onboarding from the perspective of whether they understand our systems well enough or not. So there is this whole questionnaire set that a person has to fulfill. And that's a pre-test, right? Kind of a train the trainers activity, but in a larger sense, it's more about a cultural fit activity as well, just to see if the person understands who we are and he'll be able to deal the kind of people he's going to get in his facility, right? So that was the biggest check. Only people who showed good, tangible, valid interest in taking that jump were the ones that were selected. Apart from that, we didn't really care about whether you were having a school space or you were a bookstore or if you were a kirana store or a real estate agent, as long as you had the basic tenets of speaking with empathy to people who come to you, of having a good training impetus given from you, and so on and so forth, right? A bunch of things therein. So that's one. The other thing that we always do, that we take some bit of upfront security token money. What that ensures is it only allows this absolutely serious people to be there on the platform, because we're risking you with the most important aspect of our business, which is onboarding new people for us. And you have to be serious about it. So we took some upfront security amount. So that was probably the second biggest thing that we did. And post that, it was more, and this is something which I guess people look at it a bit differently. In our case, we're not we don't see a churn to be a problem. What we do is we actively replace facilities which we feel are not really adhering to the basic standards that we requested. So and given the whole way this model was set up, it was not much of an issue for us to do as well. So when we saw that there were few types of businesses which were struggling in understanding what is needed, there are multiple metrics you can track. Whether the location you've given to us is proper or not, or whether you keep changing it. Because what happens is a delivery boy gets that location on his phone and he has to go there and then have a chat, whether it's convenient, etc. or not. You get that. B, a delivery boy gives you your NPS scores. You have to rate highly on that. C, post that partner getting onto the platform, they need to be conducting a lot of orders, which means there is a performance element to it. So we would link that to the performance as well. And basis that, if the numbers are not looking great, you either try to improve it, and if that's not happening, then you look for somebody else who can do it a little bit better. So those 3, 4, 5 things I would say is how A, we onboard people, and B, we assess quality and then churn out facilities which are really not working out. So that's on the slide idea on the flow piece.
Right. Extremely innovative. You had a lot of managers, I'm sure, who were managing the process physically through your onboarding centers, and they would have all been kind of used to this high touch model of onboarding. And suddenly we tell them that, okay, it's all remote and you're not going to meet this guy, you're not going to train him personally, and then somebody whom you've trained is now going to train, and that's a hyper local model. How was that transformation? I'm sure that must be another story.
No, it's true. I think the biggest transformation happened on day one when our whole call center team had to start working from home. I think all of them were really worried whether they would have their jobs or not, because usually call center employees are the first to worry when work from home kind of things happen, because you really rarely imagine work from home for call center folks. But that's the first thing we shifted, and luckily we were able to do it successfully. Now, broadly across the network, of course, there are a lot of roles, responsibilities, which technically speaking, we post this whole franchisee thing also coming up, we had to say that we're not going to work with anymore. But what happens is, and what ended up happening is that the tasks changed, but all the roles did remain. I think we realigned a lot of people to help support run this franchisee infrastructure. So I think that is something we were able to execute well so far as the organization is concerned. People understood this whole situation wherein the erstwhile approaches could not really work. I think it was one of those rare cases when you make such a big decision and no one really questions that. Then that's because inherently you know that this is not something you can get away with. So most people, and I'm happy that most people tried to evolve themselves in a way wherein they could take up newer tasks which were more relevant to the new scheme of things compared to what were there to the previous scheme of things. So you saw more people take up managing your call center type of work, more people working on content. So if there was a trainer, they started getting more involved in auditing training in these franchises rather than training themselves. So so those kind of roles started popping up, and you've got your BDs and all as well. Now what they do today is they help improve our referral channel. So we used to have a lot of fleet on street, and what we told them was that, look, we're not going to have a lot of fleet on street options anymore, but what we can do right now is in each of these areas we need to run a healthy network of franchisees, but we also need to ensure that our leads, so far as our referrals are concerned, needs to keep on going up. So these guys then, in their respective zones, they have smaller rider partner communities, and in those communities, they would spread the word about referrals. They would help us in just adding another layer of communication to the mobile application we have. And what that ended up doing is that it allowed everyone to have good, meaningful contribution in the journey. So I guess the problem for us was more finding interesting problem statements to work on in the newer context. More than anything else, So, but the rest of things just followed.
Yeah, and one question normally that anybody would have when we look at, when we normally think of remote onboarding, we only think of digital. I mean, this is a paradigm shift on how onboarding was transformed, and one would typically look at how was the delivery partner's experience, and that I think you answered already by saying the NPS scores are now the best probably compared to what they've been. So I think it's a great model, and I can see a lot of questions.
I'll just come in over there. This whole point on digital is an interesting one. Digital need not remove the human element from it completely. I remember I was in a when we were slightly younger than what we are today. We had a branding session wherein we were having a discussion on who we are, and the manager said that we're not really a technology company. We're a human tech company, is what he said. And at first we just smiled. We were like, what is this guy saying? Human tech, what is human tech? But we realized over the years, what we've realized is that at least our business, and especially onboarding, it has a major amount of human touch to it. You cannot just let go of it just because there are digital aspects that have come in. So for all businesses, there is always an approach wherein you can leverage your technology a bit better, but still allow all these human elements to come in. Even in this current setup, for example, 10 years ago, this would not have been possible because you cannot have such a hyperlocal construct at that point in time. You need locations to come in. You need partners to, you need proper navigation to happen. You need digital online training sessions to happen. Even today, as well, all of these assessments that we do, everything happens on the technology platform. We literally don't even get involved. When a delivery boy expresses an interest, they automatically get an SMS saying that, hey, so these are few things about us. Why don't you self-register? People who register, great. After registration, we send them an SMS which asks them to go to a nearest onboarding center, which in this case is the hyperlocal touchpoint. And there, the two people interact on their own. There is no one from the company who gets involved in between. They interact on their own. They join the network on their own, and hopefully they post that on their own. So despite there being so many people across the journey, technically speaking, it's still all tech.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's a very, very powerful integration of, and a transformation. I mean, it's hats off to you guys and congratulations for having built such a beautiful onboarding engine and being able to continue to grow at the pace at which you wanted to grow to cater to this market. I see a lot of very interesting questions around. Bhavna, over to you.
Thank you, Ajay. Thank you, Praharsh, for that really insightful conversation. And just picking up from the last piece on the human tech aspect of it. So there's a question: how are you working towards experience? I mean, be it onboarding or training employees in new skills, given it's all telephonic and it addresses a truly wide range of employee backgrounds.
Yeah, fair question. I think that question might have come in just before I mentioned the franchisee piece. So I think it is because the telephonic methods had such a poor NPS that we had to kind of work from scratch and build this whole hyperlocal construct to things. So this whole franchisee or hyperlocal touchpoint setup that we have, you literally have a place you can go to and talk in a vicinity of 500 meters. That particular facility gets some portion of income for every person who comes to them. So it's a variable model, and hence the costs don't really hurt that much. But all of these aspects of training, NPS, the whole experience of this is taken care of that. Then you've got very strict adherence to certain brand initiatives that we want to run. So you would have seen on those pictures, we wanted to have very specific posters being put out there so that people understand who we are. There are a few more things that the team is trying to add. As you can imagine, it's only been around 3 to 4 months. So there's this whole brand transformation exercise that we want to do in each of these franchisees or hyperlocal touchpoints that are there in the network, which should hopefully further help us in this.
Right. Thank you for that. So I think just adding to that, so how's the process of equipping blue collar workers been, with regards to tech proficiency wherever required? So did you face any resistance? How do you go about that?
So I guess this is to do with training people on better tech proficiency and stuff, right?
Right.
Okay. So, this has been a journey. I think so far as getting people to become tech savvy is concerned, I think this is an ecosystem change that has happened more than us doing a lot of stuff. And you have to start somewhere. In 2015, when we had launched, you would not even believe the kind of problems that we were having or we were rather facing at that point in time. The aspects which seem so normal to do today. It's very normal to go on an Ola and book a Ola cab. It was not so much, especially for delivery boys, etc., to go on a platform and then get an order and then execute it. I think in that journey, what has happened now is that most of the community understands what the platform is, what it does. But the journey from here to making them do more things on the platform is, of course, a step-by-step process. Now, how do you reach here? You have to, you can solve a problem only by starting to solve it. So once we started working on it, we didn't know it is going to take 2 to 3 years for us to solve it. But today, almost everyone understands the concept of such platforms and logistics models. Now, the other steps that we're trying to work on right now and where we do majority of our training is that on the platform, like I was mentioning earlier, we've got this whole Gurukul setup. And what happens is through these mobile-based video training modules, wherein what the platform does is it assesses a person's skill. We work across multiple categories. So it's not just tech proficiency in one area. You have to understand a lot of things in several different areas. A person might get a task of going to a customer and checking whether their products that they're returning back meet certain criteria or not, and they have to do it on their mobile platform. So what happens is that there is this whole skill journey that every person takes in the network. You start at a very basic level, and then if you want to earn more on the platform, you have to take certain skill courses, and that is under the domain of this Gurukul thing that we call, which is a training module which is within the mobile app. Once a person gets skilled in a particular content, then he becomes eligible to do more orders in a new business line, and then you monitor performance for a while. In case someone is not able to develop at all, what we are now going to do is we're also going to give them the option to go to one of these hyperlocal touchpoints to get trained more directly and physically, rather than just through an app. So I think a cumulative set of stuff being worked on so far as that is concerned.
That's quite interesting, the entire concept of a skill journey.
Yeah.
I think the way you build the remote onboarding model, the hyperlocal touchpoints model, I think that can be replicated across industries. I think, in my opinion, Prahash, I think that actually opens up probably a lot more opportunities for you guys in Shadowfax. I mean, I can see a couple of very interesting questions, because the question on how do we do remote onboarding when a thermal power station needs presence in plants? COVID-19 has famished the power sector. So this is somebody who's running a factory who needs contract labor and the kind of very similar DNA of people they're trying to onboard and struggling with it. I mean, the hyperlocal model works beautifully there as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would say is internally as well, we have huge facilities and warehouses. So a problem statement so far as hardcore delivery partners are concerned is one side of the things when people join our platform. But we also have a huge network of off-roll people who join us in our warehouses, wherein when you have to do sortation of shipments, you have to do stacking of shipments, and so on and so forth. And these warehouses can have, anywhere between 500 to 1,000 people in each. So it's a very valid question. A lot of the ideas that are mentioned here are relevant here. Some of them might not be, and hence the first step is to solve for the problem that you're facing as an organization, because that might not be the same across. For us as well, we've picked up a lot of ideas from our hyperlocal business side to our own warehouses, and these includes things such as having referrals. And that's the interesting thing. Referrals, even though it's the most simplest thing to think about, most of the organizations don't really run it. Because what happens, especially, and I'm sure the gentleman who's asked the question in the thermal power plant, what you have is you have third-party agencies whom you depend on so far as onboarding is concerned, which is great and which is required as well. But what it always helps is whether to see if you can use your own base of people to support more hiring or activities or not. So that's one thing which you can always take up, even within the power plant. You would have say 1,000 people. You can use them as your resources and your flag bearers to conduct a lot of activities that you want to do in the network. You can use them for referrals. You can have now that you have these technology platforms available, you can have search campaigns. If you have people who are there in and around that area on your platform, you can utilize them to get more leads in. And then again, you can use these people to conduct micro onboarding campaigns here and there on an ad hoc basis. So I think there are a few elements that you can customize. I agree. Not all of those things perhaps are directly replicable. And that's where I think an innovation needs to happen in various models and various types of problem statements that are there. There's no one solution fit all, but the overall concept still remains. And I think it's something which a lot of people can indeed give a thought on. In fact, just to add, I think there are a lot of third-party companies as well who are coming up with adding more of such enabling features so that as far as onboarding, etc. is concerned. Traditionally, onboarding people would just have a feet on street who would help you conduct mass hiring programs, and then they would get onboarded. You have to take care of the training and stuff. But now I think that is also getting modernized slowly. So getting more and more companies which are coming in and helping to add more facets to this whole onboarding scheme.
Right.
I think great model. I think that can be, any industry can just look at it and adapt elements of it. And I'm sure, as Prahash said, it's not a copy paste across industry sets, but usually the most simple models work the most efficient. And I think what Shadowfax has done, it's kind of really simplified the onboarding model and taken it beyond that. I think from an experience standpoint, again, I mean, one element we keep looking at, and that's where we've been surviving as a company for a long time, is Oddbridge, and is screening and background check. I mean, we collect documents. a lot of times we've seen, criminal records pop up against people who, who apply and get empaneled at these stages. And I'm sure even in these COVID times, we would have seen a lot of discrepant cases where people would have been told that you will no longer be empaneled on the platform. So when in a high-touch environment, you can still get the person face-to-face and tell him that this is the reason we are not onboarding. This is going to be slightly different. So how do you handle those kind of communications, which are crucial communications or sometime adverse as well?
No, I think first up, the whole background verification process has seen a tremendous improvement over the last 3 to 4 years. I think earlier you used to struggle to get basic code checks done. I think right now we have got wonderful systems to actually make a hyperlocal process out of it. So currently, at least the way the process works is that any person who gets onboarded onto the network, there are basic levels of checks that you need to cross. So for just doing the first order on the platform, you need to have your core documents, etc., verified and vetted by external agencies. Post that, once you've done your first order, there is a address verification that is sent, and then you've also had you also have your court verification record that is sent. And luckily for us today, you can get the responses to all of these in a very neat manner, mentioning exactly what did we not find right across various segments, right? So basis that, what happens is, so far as we are concerned, our platform just bars you from conducting any orders on the network unless and until you get a clearance. Now, that's how the process flow works, at least from on who is allowed to conduct an order on the network perspective. But you mentioned an important point on how these things are communicated for people who are not getting onboarded. So what happens in our case is that we've got, we onboard 40,000 people. You can imagine we have at least 1.5 lakh leads which come to us on a monthly basis. So having probably a conversation with everyone doesn't make a lot of sense. What happens more often than not is that if anyone wants to understand as to what is the next step and what do they need to do to get onboarded better, they can always reach out on the platform, because there is an issue section that is there. So you can raise a concern over there that I'm not able to get onboarded because of any reason, please help. In that case, the call center has a conversation and has a chat. Otherwise, there are so many people who get dropped out because of multiple reasons, because they're not being sufficient demand, etc., that it just gets bucketed or coupled under a variety of different headers. And hence, you don't always need to be speaking exactly as to what has happened because of which you're not being able to do an order on the network.
Very, very interesting to see how a model which most business models will incorporate as a fixed cost has been variabilized. The whole onboarding thing is now, success fee driven. Very, very interesting. So,
I saw a question here. How do you keep your partners engaged? Someone asked this. Yeah, I think it's a very interesting one. I just thought I'll take this because it's another new domain in the post-COVID era, right? So earlier, what you used to do was, of course, our mobile application acts as our core point of engagement. We send all communications on that. Any event that's happening would get communicated through that. But what we would conduct earlier was a lot of group sessions, wherein just the whole community in a particular region would come and just have some chats. We would award the best performers in that region and so on and so forth. But that's not happening right now. So post-COVID, what happened was that, and I guess our marketing team did a very interesting job over there. There were a lot of influencers who were out there in the market, who were also trying to look for more types of opportunities available for them. We brought a lot of them onto the platform, and today we've got a whole Facebook-like conversation section on the app. And what happens is these influencers make really funny videos, on any topic. So we send around 2 to 3 notifications a day, which are made by these influencers, and at least 1 or 2 are core company content, and the third one would usually be just something to chill out, have a look and chill out. And we've seen tremendous responses in those. I think the influencers have seen their YouTube channel likes go up, while we've seen more engagement in general, satisfaction in people and in the network. So it's just a small thing I thought I'll mention. But if given a chance, would love to share one of these videos because I saw them for the first time. It's really very funny.
Yeah, no, it was good. I think, yeah, great. Yeah, Bhavna, sorry.
Yeah, that's right. So thank you, Praharsh, and thank you, Ajay. I think that's all for the questions today. But before we close, I think one question to both of you. If you could share with us your three biggest takeaways from the conversation today, while we've discussed a lot, but what stood out for you? What was the highlight for both of you?
Harsh, first you.
Yeah, I think I would just come back to the point on this whole onboarding piece being a human tech kind of a thing. I think often that is overlooked is that once you go to a lot of these digital domains, there is a bit of a wall that ends up getting created, a digital wall, but a wall nevertheless. So what we realized, at least in this journey, was that it's best to have to use technology in a way wherein you kind of remove the wall, but still have immense amount of technology used in the network. I think this whole human tech element, I would just put one key thing, and there's this human tech element that I would like to close with, I guess.
Yeah, I think for me, considering that I've been a part of some of the other sessions as well, I think one question which keeps coming from practitioners is how do we convince our business leaders to sign off on the business case of digital, remote, and so on and so forth. So I think anybody looking at this session, I will say, I mean, for business leaders, this is a very strong message that you have to bring technology into your DNA. Today, no organization can survive without technology in the DNA. And we have to start looking at and questioning every basic process, like what Shadowfax did to its own onboarding process, and realize that they are a hyper-local company, so why not hyper-local even on onboarding? So questioning something as simple as that, and they found a great solution. So organizations have to promote innovative thinking. We have to be nimble when we come to adopting new processes in the current times when things can change very, very dynamically. And I think COVID gave us a lot of us a wake-up call. Business leaders have to be very, very open to change, and particularly adopting technology. So I don't think there's a need for a business case. I think it's just you have to do it.
And I think I'll just add there, Ajay. I think the point on a lot of third parties also supporting this journey also means that a lot of traditional businesses need not build their own technology per se. They can leverage a lot of what is already out there. Post which the budgets start looking not that much. They start looking pretty comparable to the spend you'd already be making on any existing onboarding or remote hiring flow that you have. So it's all about just seeing what else is out there and then trying to see what works best for you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. And now, Ajay, since this is our final session for the Remote Hiring Week 2020, I'm going to leave you with one last question. So what would your message be for our audience today as a closing note for the Remote Hiring Week?
I think, onboarding, hiring remotely is now going to be the way of life. I mean, I think, it's no longer, a luxury item, as we all used to say, okay, we'll continue to do business the way we were doing business. I think we don't have a vaccine for COVID inside. We don't, even if there is something like that coming in, we are not eradicating COVID like, yes, tomorrow morning. And we are all becoming slowly and steadily used to this work from home model. So the business lives are going to be very, very different. So might as well adopt to the new normal and build your processes around it. So whether irrespective of what business you're in, what industry or what customer base you're catering to, you have to find a way to sit down with the tech team, sit with some innovators, and find ways of working around, including onboarding, which I think there are enough and many options available, solutions available out there for you to explore. That's all. And I think the world is going to be the new normal.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that, Ajay. And we are bang on time. And I absolutely agree. Technology is no longer a luxury, but it's growing to truly become the need of this hour.
Yeah.
So with this, we're going to now wrap up today's event. Thank you so much, Ajay and Praharsh, for giving us your time for today's session. Once again, we thank our partner, Oddsbridge, and our speakers for the invaluable information they've shared with us today. Thank you so much. For all our attendees, just one last thing. Please do provide your feedback in the survey link provided in the chat section because your input matters. It has been a pleasure hosting all of you throughout this week, and without your support and inputs, this week would not have been possible. So thank you so much. Stay tuned to your inbox for the closing newsletter of this week. It's going to consist of all the insights, learnings, video session links, and of course, the key takeaways from Remote Hiring Week 2020. We now conclude this week. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Ajay. Thank you, Praharsh. Have a great week ahead.